Alright YouTube, this is Early Ois Garage. So I was doing some engraving, so I figured I'd start doing some videos on it here. I know in my first video I had mentioned that I was going to start doing videos on engraving, forging, and I've got reloading, bullet casting. My first video was a bullet casting video because that's what I happened to be doing at the time. So this is going to be an engraving video. There is a ton of information to go over as far as engraving goes. So my plan is this will have to be like a series. I don't know how many parts it's going to be, but it's going to have to be broken up into a bunch of videos, so you guys aren't sitting there watching like a 3-hour video on this stuff, because there is a crazy amount of information to go over when it comes to engraving. I am by no means a master engraver. I am completely self-taught. I have watched a bunch of online videos. There are classes you can take, training videos and things that you can get. I have not gotten any of those videos, and there are no classes in my area. So most of everything I figured out has come from trial and error, except for a few things I've caught on videos. My reasoning for doing these videos is looking up information on engraving is tough. 9 times out of 10, it's just you're watching a guy engrave. He's not really explaining what he's doing. Or you get a quick video of just a little bit of information, and whoever does the video says, all right, now go buy my class, or, go to my site and look up my books and yada yada. So first off, if you are just thinking about getting into engraving, it's a lot of fun. I really like it. It is a skill that requires a ton of patience. Like I said, I've been doing it for a bunch of years, and I'm by no means a master engraver. I mean, I started out just trial and error. So this one is going to be, first part video is just going to be some basic tool type stuff, and I'll probably go more in depth on this guy, which is my 360 bench vise that I built, in another video. That'll have to be another one on what I did for that. I may touch a little bit on it in this one. I'm not going to show how to assemble it. There are different ways to do a 360 vise. You can do a ball vise out of a, if you can get a big bearing or something, or I've even seen guys do them out of bowling balls. But this particular one I built out of a washing machine clutch. This is an old Samsung washing machine clutch that I tore apart, flipped it over, and then basically pinned this board and this drill press vise onto it so that the thing rotates 360 degrees. The nice thing about the Samsung clutch, which other clutches don't have, if you're thinking of doing an appliance part type build like this one has resistance. I got to put some effort into it to turn it. It'll rotate free 360 degrees, but it's got resistance to it, so that when I'm tapping on this metal and working the graver through the steel, I'm not turning the thing on myself. Now, this is going to be legitimate hand engraving, and I will say outright, this is the hard way to do it. There are machines out there. You can get air gravers, things like that. I've seen a lot of videos on building them yourself. I am not at that point where I'm ready to build one. This is how they did it in the old days, and I've had friends and people I've run into that I've discussed engraving with that have told me they prefer the hand engraving over the machine engraving, machine being a hand piece driven by air, because it's like it was back in the day. That's what you're going to see on an old Colt or something. You're going to see that thing was hand engraved. Somebody sat there and knocked that thing out by hand. So we'll get straight into it on tools, which is what we're looking at here. Like I said, I'm going to have to break this thing up. So basic tools. You'll need some sort of vise, something. I mean, I used a regular old bench vise for a long time. This isn't the one. I used a bigger one, but find you a bench vise that rotates. You know, the one I used for a long time had a bigger degree of rotation on the base of it, and that worked fine. I had to, you know, turn the vise and then take my work, whatever I was engraving, and turn it at times, loosen it, reattach it the other direction, long ways, things like that, which worked. It was time consuming and a little bit frustrating at times, but it worked. So you'll need some sort of vise, something to hold your work in. That's a good start. You can manage. I did for a long time before I thought to build this thing. So if you can come up with something to give you a 360-degree rotation, it's definitely a lot less of a headache than trying to constantly open the vise up, turn the thing around, put it back in, yada yada. So there's ways to do that. Look up some videos on that. You might run into one with something that you have on hand. I know not everybody's got a clutch from a washing machine lying around. So you'll need a chasing hammer or some sort of, something. I recommend the chasing hammer. I did do different types of hammers. I used a lot of different things as hammers, but the nice thing about the chasing hammer is that they're light. And a lot of this, especially if you're going to do, legitimate hand engraving, you're going to need a lighter something to tap with. I've even used a crescent wrench at one point. I was using a crescent wrench that I shut, a real small one that was working pretty good. But this was on Amazon. They're not that expensive. I think it was like $8. Just, I don't know the weight of it. You can get different weights on them. But this works good for what I'm doing. If you need lighter taps, if you're trying to get a deeper cut, you hold the thing way down at the end. If you're trying to go shallow, I'll even hold it right there and give a little tap as I'm doing it. So something to hold your work, a hammer, and then you're going to need gravers. You can get them online. I don't know if this is how you pronounce it, but Geiswin? I don't know. They sell the things. So this one, which is stuck in a sharpening tool, this is a carbide one. The carbide ones are nice. They're a little more resilient. I started with this one on a video. Get that to focus. On a video that I saw that suggested this one as a good starter one, which is basically 99.9% of what I've ever done has been with one of these. I've been looking into some other ones, different styles. But something like this with that diamond type way it sits there, that's a good starter one. And they range in price, I think. They can get expensive, I'll be honest. That's the other thing is this, even just starting out, if you're going to do it the hand engraving way, the machines can be up to $2,000, but even these things are like $20+ sometimes, and that's what you're getting, is this little piece of steel. You can get blanks once you get to a point where you're good enough. You can make your own for what you're trying to do. This is a flat. I rarely use it. I haven't quite figured out how to sharpen it perfectly, nor do I do the type of work that this thing would be required to be, the regular used piece. I'm doing line stuff, stuff you saw on old guns, English scroll, things of that, like that. I don't get into, well, I haven't yet gotten into things like relief engraving and bright cut type stuff. Or if you really are good and you get into it, Bellino, I think is how you pronounce it. But that's basically a bunch of little marks that make up a whole picture. Those are the ones that you see like a deer engraved on something with crazy detail. So you'll need some gravers. This is a good one. For what I'm doing, this one works. So this is a sharpening tool. And this I got on Amazon. It was like $5. It's not crazy high quality. It works though. It took me some trial and error to get it figured out. Because this teardrop's cut not perfect. So I have, through using it, figured out a way to hold this thing in there. Always, in my case, with this piece facing, I guess if it's straight ahead of you, facing right. And that is so for consistency, because this isn't quite cut perfect inside of this teardrop. So, and then I haven't got anything that requires this angle, but I've figured out how to put the graver in here consistently to get a consistent angle. And that's what you're looking for, is consistency. Even a basic, sharpener, something that you can set your angles, is going to run you like $60. So this thing, it's a good buy for the price. It works good. I've got it now at a point where I can stay consistent without, it gives me a consistent face on the front of here. And then you're going to need sharpening materials. So this is one, and Sam Alfano is like the guy for engraving, one of the big ones. One of his old videos I saw, when he was hand sharpening stuff. This is, on Amazon, these are only a couple dollars. This is a Easy Lap Diamond Hone, and this is the fine one. You're going to want the fine. And basically, which that'll have to be a whole nother video, sharpening, but this thing is great for, you start sharpening your face, and then you can move on. He's got a ceramic one. I've had a heck of a time finding ceramic stones. I've not found one that I can just order, but I did find this Arkansas stone, which has worked good for me. So I'll take it to there to get the face, and then you smooth it out to get a better, your mirrored finish on here, which that's all gonna have to be another video, will affect your cut, how clean your cut is. And then this is an old whetstone that I've had forever. I think this was my grandpa's even, that I use. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, all on the face. That flat face, the dark part of there we go. So anyway, and a second graver helps for sharpening, which I can get into in a sharpening video. But that's what I use to put the heel on there, is this guy. When you're doing it by hand, if you ain't got all the fancy, expensive tools. Like I said, this is, you're going to put in a little bit of money to get started doing this, and it's going to take a lot of time and patience to get to a point where you actually want to engrave something that's not just a practice plate. So, things like that. Something to assist engraving. There's a bunch of different options out there. This one's like $5, so it worked good. Something to hold your work, a hammer, and then practice plate. I do, like I've said, forging, so this is just old knife blank that I didn't come out the way I wanted. And so I scrapped it, and I used it for a practice plate. I don't know how much I've put on this thing, and I'll just take it to the belt grinder and grind it off. So there's some of the practice stuff that I've done on there. You see that one's even half ground off because I cleaned this edge, because I had somebody that wanted me to make a dog tag, and I'd never done letters before. So I thought, I better practice some lettering before I get into making a final product, because I had to forge that dog tag. That's what she wanted. So you're going to need a practice plate, something to hold your work. There's, in my case, I use a piece of wood and glue stick, hot glue stick, to hold things on. So, and that thing's on there pretty good. So you just heat it up with a lighter, smear it on there, get it locked into place. The other side of this block of wood actually has a whole glue stick melted on it, because what I did, I just stuck it on there for this. You can see that's all glue stick stuck to the back of it, because I just heat up the glue stick with a torch and pin this thing to it, and then practice whatever I needed to do. So other things that come in handy is, this is a container that I use for this China white, which I found in another video. This helps you draw on metal with a pencil so you can see. And this is I think I got this at the Hobby Lobby. Chinese white. It's a watercolor. You just put a little bit. In my case, I got this thing. Put a little bit in here, add enough water not to make it thin, but to thin it out, and then spread it on your work face, let it dry, and you can draw on it with a pencil. And if you mess up, you can just reapply and redraw. It's kind of like your eraser there. So, I mean, I've used barely any of this stuff, and what was it, $5? So it'll last a long time. And then a set of these guys. Calipers? No, that's for measuring. I am drawing a blank, but this helps if you're trying to get into straight lines and things, which I have only put this to use in practice, but again, Amazon, they were cheap. You just line it up, draw your line. So that's kind of a basic overview of things you're going to need if you're looking to get into hand engraving. And a lot of the stuff like that happens to be, like I said, an old knife blank, but you can get copper plates off the internet. I just never did that because I got, as you can see, scrap steel like crazy for my forging. And I've got knife blanks lying around. Here's one. That one's not for practice. That one's going to be a fillet knife at some point here when I get around to grinding it down. But at one point I think I had even a doorknob, an old doorknob that I flattened out as best I could and used. You could even use the doorknob not flattened out because guns aren't flat everywhere. If you're looking at doing a barrel, you're gonna want to practice angles. And I'm not even at that point that I've had to get much into doing angles and things, but that's gonna come around at some point. But so sharpening tools. Oh, this guy, which I forgot to mention. So there are graver handles. I made one out of wood at one point, but the more engraving I did, the farther the graver would mash down into the wood and then it'd start getting loose. You can buy, like on Sam Alfano's site, an actual hand engraver that holds it. It's got a set screw. If you got tap and die system, you could make all that. But that thing was like $60. So if you had a tap and die set up, you could just get like this and then tap a set screw in there instead of using electrical tape like I did. But this was just a bolt that I grabbed from Ace Hardware, and I ground the edges off of it, and I ran a drill down the center of it, which would be probably super hard to do if you didn't have a drill press. So think outside the box. But I just ran a drill bit down the center of this thing, and then that fit my graver, and I tape with this electrical tape or whatever I got, tape the graver in. And in this case, since this is the one I use all the time, I basically left it in there. I mean, this bolt was like, what, 20 cents or something crazy? So, like I said, I used wood, and you can get by with wood. You just got to use a harder wood. I just had basic soft stuff around here from woodworking projects where I'm doing more like intarsia things. But the bolt worked real good. So, think outside the box. Same with this thing. One of the ball vices for this stuff is like $800, $600. Handpiece is $2,000. I've got a hammer that was like $8, couple gravers for roughly $20, $30. This was like $2 that I had. I think I got this at Sportsman's Warehouse, part of a knife sharpening kit for like, I don't know, $10 maybe. Bolt was nothing. Any metal you can come across, you can engrave. Take it to the sander, clear it. Get something, if you can come up with something thicker, clear it and start over. So that's pretty much the gist of tools. Something to hold your work, chasing hammer or something equivalent. I started with a regular old carpenter style hammer, and that thing was just too heavy. Sharpening equipment, gravers, yada yada. So the hardest, it's like in every single video I've pretty much got, it's all muscle memory. So the sharpening by far, I will say, is the hardest part. So keep that in mind. It's I'll spend 10 minutes engraving and I'll spend 10 to 15 sharpening. Because if you don't keep it sharp, your cuts come out terrible. Let's see if I can get a view of you can kind of see my image transfer there. Something else to do for image transfer, if you got a LaserJet printer, you can find videos and things online for ink transfer where you just print off what you want. And I'll do a whole video about, figuring out your work and what you want to actually engrave at some point here. But I don't have an inkjet printer. If you already got one, great. I've got a monochrome, and that doesn't transfer as well. So what I actually use is, in my case, I'll draw it in a sketchbook that I have big. It's a lot easier to draw that intricate stuff larger. Take a picture of it on my phone, email it to myself, open the email, attach it to a Word document, then you can resize your photograph. And then once I get it to the size I want for what I'm working on, I will take a piece of tracing paper and lay it over the computer screen and trace it out. It's a little bit harder to do because I'm tracing it with a fine point Sharpie, but you can see how small that is on here. So trace it with a Sharpie, and then this charcoal paper works great. So here's like a little one, I got it just to see, whatever you set it on something and you draw on it, and it leaves that imprint on there. You can do it over the China White if you want to. I've got some lights. That's the other thing, lighting. You're gonna need some lighting. I found this guy at a Habitat Restore. It does have a magnifying glass in it, though I don't really use it. But it's a light that I can move around and pivot to change, what I want for my lighting, change my angle, because sometimes that charcoal print is hard to see at certain angles. And then you're gonna want, you don't have to. If you're doing bigger stuff, practicing, I didn't wear these. But when I'm getting into smaller stuff like this knife I'm making, some sort of, I guess, zoom eye equipment. So this has got two options on it. I think that's a 20 and that's a 10. And I got this one at Amazon. I think it was like $10, $12. There's a set of lights on there, though they're not very bright. The one I've got on there works way better. There's a lot of options in stuff like this. So look for a design like this, because I got an actual eyeglass one before this that had, you could change the lenses to zoom in. It was super cheap on Amazon again. And it was nice, but I had literally my face on what I was working on to actually see anything. It was too zoomed in. So this works good for the basic type stuff that I'm doing. I'm gonna have to get a better set or something along those lines when I get more intricate and smaller type stuff. Some of the big name guys are using machines, the thousands of dollars in air engraving machines. They've got the expensive vise. They've got essentially a microscope that they can set their eyes on that just zooms on this thing. And you'll understand that if you're looking up other videos where it's like hardcore zoomed in. So I wanted to do some of these videos on this engraving, especially because there's very little out there. It's, like I said, somebody telling you, here's the basic info, go and buy my class, or it's just, you're basically just watching some guy work, and he's not telling you anything. He's not telling you why he's doing it that way, or, what he had to do to his equipment, his graver, to get it to go that way. So I do know that if you can spring for the air gravers and you want to dump that much into a new hobby, someday I might get one. But if you can spring for one of those, it is considerably easier to do this stuff, because you just, one hand holds the graver does all the cutting for you. It's air piston driven with air, and then to do your curves and your clean lines, the vise is what helps you with that. Whereas I'm holding this thing in one hand, I'm holding the chasing hammer in the other, and I'm myself turning and having to stop, turn the vise, and then restart where I was. So, engraving's a lot of fun. It definitely requires patience, like I said. So, keep at it if you're just starting out. It will get frustrating at times. I spent months and months and months wondering why I couldn't do anything that looked, remotely nice. So just wanted to start off with a tools video. I mean, like I said, this is why I had to break it up. We're already 25 minutes in, just in tools. So I'll get into detail, things like that. How to sharpen, how to transfer work. We'll do a video on how to transfer work. There's a ton of different options. There's a bunch of stuff I've never used even yet. So keep looking out for those videos. Scroll through, find some other information that I have not yet provided, and keep at it. It's tough, but when you get something that comes out nice, like this one here, I've avoided. This is like one of the best practice ones I ever did, and I've avoided grinding it off because I don't want to see it go. And I mean, it's decent. See if we can get up here. Shading's a little off here and there. You can see the backbone of my scroll isn't perfect. I've got a couple start stops that were cutting shallow. But anyway, so keep at it. And like I said, this will be a multiple part series, and I'll get some more videos out there for this. So appreciate it. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks.